Have you ever wondered why wise people are often silent in stressful situations? Why are they not quick to speak up, even when they could say things that would make others admire them? Is it possible that silence contains an invisible power that only those who truly understand life can grasp? Let's explore four profound stories to understand why wise people often choose silence as the answer. 1. The Zen Master and the Hot-Tempered Young Man. Once upon a time, in a small village, there was a young man who was famous for his hot-tempered nature and often quarreled with people around him. Although many people had advised him, he still did not change. One day, a friend advised him to seek advice from a famous Zen master in the area. The young man listened and went to the temple where the Zen master practiced. When he arrived, he saw the Zen master meditating under an old tree. He approached and told him about his situation, hoping to be taught how to control his anger. The Zen master listened attentively, then invited the young man to sit down next to him. He did not say anything, just sat silently. The young man began to feel confused, not understanding why the Zen master did not answer his question. He gradually felt uncomfortable and wanted to leave, but then decided to patiently sit back. After a while, the Zen master opened his eyes and said, "Do you see your anger as a storm? When the storm comes, it sweeps everything away, making everything around it chaotic. But after the storm passes, everything becomes peaceful and quiet again." The Zen master continued, "Silence is the way for you to face your anger. When you are silent, you will not be caught up in the storm of emotions. Instead of reacting immediately, stop and take a deep breath. Let silence help you observe and understand your emotions better." The young man began to understand what the Zen master meant. He continued, "Whenever you feel angry, find a quiet place and sit quietly. Let silence help you calm down. When you master silence, you will master your emotions." From then on, the young man began to practice silence whenever he felt angry. He gradually found calmness and control over his temper. He became more calm, and his relationships with people around him also became better. This story teaches that silence is a powerful tool to control emotions, especially anger. When we are silent, we can observe and understand our emotions better, thereby making wiser responses. Silence helps us avoid thoughtless actions, and words in anger helps maintain relationships and creates peace of mind. Silence is also a way for us to find calmness and wisdom in every situation. Remember that silence can be the key to understanding and controlling emotions. When we learn to be silent, we will become stronger in facing life's challenges. 2. The Wise King and the Mute Man. Once upon a time, there was a kingdom located in the middle of a vast forest. The king of this kingdom was famous for his wisdom and fairness. He always listened to everyone's opinions and used his wisdom to solve the people's problems. One day, a mute man came to see the king. This man was a gentle and hard-working farmer, but he lost his voice after a serious illness when he was young. This mute man was often ridiculed and looked down upon by others because he could not speak. He came to see the king to ask for advice on how to live peacefully and be useful in society. The king listened to the story and invited the mute man into the palace. After listening to the man's story through signs and the interpreter's explanation, the king said nothing but smiled and signaled the mute man to follow him. Together they walked through the palace's large garden. The king led the mute man to a clear lake where many birds were chirping. The two sat down by the lake. The king said nothing, just listening to the birds singing and the sound of running water. The mute also sat silently, feeling the peace around him. After a while, the king took the mute to a quiet room in the palace. In the room there was only a large mirror. The king signaled the mute to look into the mirror and asked, "What do you see?" The mute looked into the mirror and saw himself. He understood that the king was trying to tell him something through this reflection. The king gently placed his hand on the mute's shoulder and wrote on a piece of paper, "Silence is the most powerful language. You don't need to speak to convey wisdom and kindness. Let your actions and sincerity speak for themselves. Others will see your worth through what you do, not through what you say." The mute understood and felt relieved. He thanked the king by bowing deeply and returned to his village with a peaceful mind. From then on, he continued to live a peaceful life, helping others with his actions and kindness. Gradually, people in the village began to respect and love him for his sincerity and helpfulness. This story teaches that silence can be the most powerful and meaningful language. It is not necessary to use words to express your value and kindness. Sincere actions and hearts can convey more than any words. When we are silent and act with a sincere heart, we will create respect and love from others. Silence is not only a way to keep peace in the soul, but also a way to live a meaningful and useful life. 3. The Sage and the Villagers. Once upon a time, in a small village, there was a sage who was famous for his wisdom and calmness. The villagers often came to him for advice when they encountered difficulties in life. One day, a man from the village came to see the sage. He was very angry because a friend had said bad things about him behind his back. The man said, "Sir, my friend has been saying bad things about me. I am very angry and want to confront him to clear things up." The sage listened, smiled, and said, "Follow me to a place." The man was confused, but still followed the sage. Together they went to an old well in the village. The sage stopped and told the man to look into the water in the well and tell me what he saw. The man looked into the well and said, "I see my image." The sage nodded and said, "Now throw a stone into the well and look again." The man did so. As the stone fell, the water in the well was disturbed, and the man's image became distorted. The sage asked, "What do you see now?" The man replied, "I see my image is distorted and unclear." The sage smiled and said, "That's right. When your mind is disturbed by anger, you cannot see the truth clearly. Be quiet and calm like the water in the well. When it is not disturbed, you will see things more clearly." The man listened and decided not to confront his friend in anger. Instead, he returned home and spent some time thinking in silence. After a few days, he realized that his friend's gossip was just a small part of life and not worth damaging their long-standing friendship. The man returned to the sage and thanked him for his valuable advice. From then on, he learned to control his emotions and found peace in silence. This story illustrates that silence and calmness can help us see clearly all the problems in life. When our mind is not stirred by negative emotions, we will have a clearer view and make better decisions. Silence not only helps us find peace, but is also the key to unlocking wisdom and deep understanding. 4. The Sage and the Young Man. Once upon a time, in a small village at the foot of a mountain, there lived a sage who was famous for his wisdom and kindness. People in the village often came to him for advice on life's problems. One day, an ambitious young man came to see the sage. The young man had learned a lot of knowledge from books and always wanted to show off his knowledge. He said to the sage, "Sir, I have learned a lot of things, and I would like to be taught by you so that I can become a wise man like you." The sage smiled and invited the young man to go for a walk with him. They went up a high mountain where there was an ancient temple lying peacefully in the middle of the wild nature. When they reached the temple, the sage invited the young man to sit down in front of a large Buddha statue and asked him to keep quiet for an hour. The young man felt a little embarrassed, but still obeyed and sat quietly. As time passed, the young man began to feel his heart calm down. He heard the wind blowing through the trees, the chirping of birds, and the babbling of the stream. The silence and the surrounding scenery made him feel peaceful and serene. After an hour, the sage returned and asked, "What did you feel during that silence?" The young man replied, "Master, I heard the wind, the birds, and the stream. I felt my soul was peaceful and serene. Silence helps me realize things that I normally do not pay attention to." The sage smiled and said, "You see, silence is not just not talking, but also a way to listen and feel the world around you. When your soul is calm, you will realize important things that you usually ignore. Wisdom does not come from books, but also from silence and contemplation." The young man understood the valuable lesson. He realized that to become a wise person, not only knowledge is needed, but also silence and contemplation. From then on, he began to practice silence every day, listening and feeling the life around him. This story teaches that silence is an important part of wisdom. Silence helps us listen and feel the world around us, realizing things that we normally ignore. Wisdom does not only come from book knowledge, but also from silence and contemplation. When the mind is calm, we will see more clearly and understand more deeply the nature of life. Silence not only brings peace of mind, but also helps us access wisdom and deep understanding. 5. The Buddha and his disciples on silence. In the past, the Buddha often traveled everywhere to teach and spread the Dharma. One day, when he and his disciples were passing through a forest, they stopped to rest on the bank of a river. The disciples gathered around the Buddha, wishing to hear more of his precious teachings. One of the disciples, a young and enthusiastic man, asked, "Master, how can we attain peace and wisdom like you?" The Buddha did not answer immediately. He just smiled and asked his disciples to sit silently on the riverbank. After a while, the Buddha picked up a leaf that had fallen nearby and dropped it into the river. He asked, "What do you think of this leaf as it floats along the water?" One of the disciples replied, "Master, the leaf floats very gently and does not cause any ripples on the water." The Buddha nodded and said, "The leaf gently drifts along the stream, just like your mind when it is not disturbed by negative thoughts and emotions. Silence is the way to keep the mind calm and peaceful." He continued, "When you are silent, you can listen more deeply and understand more clearly. Silence helps you realize the true nature of everything around you. Just like the peaceful surface of water reflects everything clearly and truthfully." The Buddha continued to tell the story of one time when he met a very angry man who wanted to argue with him. The man kept saying insulting words and testing the Buddha's patience. However, the Buddha remained silent and did not react. After a while, the man got tired and asked, "Why didn't you say anything to counter my words?" The Buddha smiled and replied, "If someone gives you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man replied, It belongs to the person who gave it. The Buddha said, "That's right. I do not accept your anger, so it still belongs to you." The disciples realized that silence is not just a state of not speaking, but also a way to deal with negative emotions and keep peace of mind. Silence helps them listen and understand better, without being disturbed by external influences. This story teaches that silence has great power in keeping the mind calm and peaceful. Silence not only helps us listen and understand better about the world around us, but also helps us deal with negative emotions. By remaining silent, we avoid unnecessary conflicts and find inner peace. Silence is a powerful tool for gaining wisdom and insight. Through the stories, we can see that silence is not only a sign of wisdom, but also a way to keep peace in the soul. Wise people understand that it is not always necessary to speak up. Sometimes silence is the strongest answer. I look forward to receiving your opinions on these stories. Don't forget to leave comments and share your thoughts below. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next interesting stories. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.